welcome to the first ever session of the AASPI Speaker Series. My name is Russell, I'm the Vice President of AASPI and your MC for tonight. Before we start, do a little bit of housekeeping. So I don't know if there's anyone online with any mic open, but if you keep your mic muted for the presentation, it'll keep down the background noise. I think Susan's going to be on top of that one though. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat function of your Zoom screen. And our moderator for tonight, Susie B, will pose the questions to Adrian at the end of his presentation. So tonight's presentation will be recorded and uploaded to our newly created AASPI YouTube channel. So we haven't launched that one yet, so I guess we'll send an email out after tonight so you can access the channel via a link. And for those who are new to AASPI and unfamiliar with the committee, I'd like to introduce you to the committee members. So the committee members are online if you want to unmute and say hello as you're introduced. I've got monitoring the chat function. We have our President, Susie Brunialti. Suze, well, you can wave, yeah. Treasurer, Stephen Bowater. We have our marketing guru, Mike Reed. Social media coordinators, Penny Dickery and Emmy Yench. We have our newsletter scribe. Is Joe on the line? No, he's not there. We'll join in later. And our not so ordinary members, we have Peter Waters, John C or JC. We have Saminda, Brent Lukey, and Gary Parkinson. And last but not least, we have a committee member and presenter for tonight's session, Adrian Whear. So on behalf of the committee, I'd like to welcome all members and guests for this presentation. And I guess I'll start with a little bit more on Adrian, and I'll pass it over to Adrian. I asked for a bio, he didn't really give me that much, so he gave me, I think he's going to let his pictures speak for himself, but he gave me a short description. I guess he's describing himself as someone who loves to travel, occasionally taking a decent pic. And when he's not traveling, he likes to walk around Melbourne with the hope of occasionally taking a decent pic. So without further ado, let's take a trip through the streets of Bangladesh with Adrian Whear. Take it away, Adrian.
Okay, thank you all, and welcome to the first AASPI Speaker Series. This is something we hope to get going over the next few weeks, so hopefully we start off okay in the first night. I'll just share my screen, and we'll make sure that's all working okay. Is that all thumbs up, Sue? All good? Excellent. Okay, so Bangladesh. I think a few of you know, I went to Bangladesh last year and spent some time there. Oops, I'm just going to get this down. So I love to travel, as I went there at the start. And for when I travel, I look for, I love culture, I love people, and I love food. And so when I'm looking at where I'm going to go next, they're the type of aspects I'm going around. And I've been to places like Morocco, Ethiopia, Vietnam, India, China, Egypt, and Jordan. So come mid-2018, I was sort of deciding to go somewhere in early 2019, and I was trying to work out what's the next place I wanted to go. And Bangladesh ended up coming across my radar. And initially I was going to go to India. I've been to India before. But I started hearing about Bangladesh. I work at a university and I work with a number of students who are from Bangladesh, and they were starting to talk to me about it and saying, you should go, you should go, you should see it, you'll love it. And so I started doing some investigation into Bangladesh, and as we go here, I found it's a country in Southeast Asia. I'd heard of it before, of course, but I didn't know much about it apart from, we beat them in cricket often. That was about my knowledge of Bangladesh. But it was part of India until 1947 when the region became East Pakistan. In 71, after the Language and Liberation War with Pakistan, Bangladesh was formed as an independent nation. It's got a population of about 162 million people, and it's rapidly growing. It's the 8th most populated country in the world, but in landmass, it's the 92nd in the world. So it's one of the most densely populated countries on the planet. It's one of the least most visited countries on the planet too, especially by Western tourists. And that was one of the attractions to me, to go to a place that I've often thought of Cambodia, and I hear stories of Cambodia when it first opened up and how amazing it was, and now how tourism has taken over a lot and that with it. And I was really appealed to me to go to somewhere where it wasn't affected by tourism that way. And that was the experience I got from the moment I hit the ground. There is little tourism, if any tourism infrastructure at all. And the positives and negatives that come of that don't exist in Bangladesh. So there's no souvenirs, there's no souvenir sellers, there's no touts. There's very few beggars, and the beggars that are there are genuine beggars. It's not like India when you go there, the moment you walk out of a car, there's somebody trying to sell you a trinket on one side and there is a beggar on the other side. That doesn't exist in Bangladesh. It's so genuine. I have found through it that the Bengali people, they're economically poor, but they're so rich and generous and in their soul. And it's something I experienced every single day. So why Bangladesh? It's a question I got asked many times when I told people I was going there. Well, firstly, I'm not a person who sits beside the pool sipping pina coladas. And I'm definitely not into cruising. That's not my go. I'm high energy. I like to be stimulated. I like to be challenged. And I'm more interested in these type of ships. And so I spent 15 days there and I took 20,000 shots in those 15 days. So let's see why I went to Bangladesh. So Dhaka, life in Dhaka revolves around the river. I spent the first week or so in Dhaka, but just the first couple of days familiarising myself with it, trying to get around, usually very unsuccessfully, stuck in a rickshaw in endless traffic jams, but eventually making my way down towards the river, and that's where life happens. And all sorts of boats going through there. Most of these ones are water taxis that transport people to and across the river. This was taken from a bridge as I was walking across, just holding the camera over it. There's just daily life along the river in Dhaka. People going back and forth, work, shopping, whatever they're doing, traveling across the river. Just more life along the river there. The water itself is heavily, heavily polluted. I wouldn't put my toe in it personally, but yeah, it's life. Dhaka is life around that river. And just another shot there from around the river. You can see the rubbish and that along the banks built up there. This is one when I took it across. I then went up that building that we saw the first shot from, and I was taking some shots up above the river from there. And then these men come out when I was up there, and they were behind me and started talking and just interested in what I was doing. Then they asked me to come in, and what I didn't realise is that they put me in and they were working in their sweatshop, this is the only photo I actually took inside the sweatshop and all that there. It's dark and it was warm and hot. But as I sort of got to learn, learn's probably the wrong word, but I come to sort of my assessment of it as I went through Bangladesh. Working in the sweatshops there wasn't great. It wasn't a wonderful job at all, as we all know, but in comparison to some of the brutal work I saw through the stone quarries and the brick factories and all that there on it, in relative terms, it's not too bad, but it's still not much, you know. One of the first places I visited, I struggled in Dhaka in shooting in my normal style. One of the things I found is that as I was just walking through the old town of Dhaka, every eye was on me. Well, not every, but most of them. People were around me. I was sort of this Pied Piper type character. There's not many Western tourists, so you know, this stands out. So it was hard to get these candid type shots. People had many selfies. A lot of people wanted selfies with me. I'm on 1 million Bangladesh Facebook pages, I'm not sure. So it was the workplaces that I found that were interesting, and I found it was easier to shoot because that's where people were working. And as long as I didn't interrupt while they were doing, access was just limitless. OHS is literally non-existent. I was very fortunate to be able to hook up with the Bangladesh Photographic Society. I know I'm so generous with their time. I had people, every day people from the BPS offering to take me around, take me to different spots. They were so kind and generous. So one of the first places they took me was to the metalworking areas in the aluminium factories and some of the small back lanes in Old Dhaka. These were so dark, and I struggled to shoot in them. I didn't have the right gear. You really needed to bring some sort of torch or something with you. So this is pretty much one of the only shots that work inside of them. Even at really ISO f2.8, shooting at like 1/30th, ISO was through the roof just to try and get something through. But yeah, it just gives you an idea of what it's like. They're working in bare feet. There's metal shavings all over the floor. It's really dark there through it. And they're working with the lathes. There's just no safety gear at all with it. So harsh environment. So this was one of my first introductions into work life in Bangladesh. But what I did do is just outside were a number of the kids who are children of the people who are working there. They're already probably starting to do some work around the factories. So I just wanted to, I spent some time with them and photographed some of these children. And I asked this boy to hold up one of the aluminium offcuts that were on the ground just to frame his eyes. I just sort of added to the story that was going on here. This kid fascinated me, this boy. He followed me around a lot of it, and we got on well together. His hands, I'm not sure how old he was, but I was guessing he was 12 or so, and his hands were enormous and for his age. And so I eventually asked him to pose for a photograph for me with his hands. They just fascinated me. This is an idea shot through the window, a little bit of light. It was a cloudy day for the most part when we were there, so I weren't getting any light coming through the windows inside the factories. And here's a young girl there as well with her eyes that just grabbed my heart when I saw them, and they still do every time I see it. So bit of life there in the metal factories. But the brick factories is one of the things that Bangladesh and a lot of the areas in that sort of continental region of Asia are sort of infamous for, I suppose. But in Bangladesh, as I've said about with this rapid urban expansion going on, there's a huge demand for cheap building materials. So the land around Dhaka, it's full of chimneys, and it's just spewing out thick black smoke from all the millions of bricks being burnt. It's from coal to fire the kilns to fire the bricks. I got this one, I was doing some research for this, and the World Bank estimates that approximately 1 million people in Bangladesh are employed in brick factories, and they're producing 23 million bricks a year. And this is all done by hand. There is virtually no machinery involved, with the average wage being US $350 to $950 a day. And some of these people are carrying 1,000, 2,000 bricks a day. It's just such hard work. So I spent 2 days going around the different brick factories and just watching people work and moving around it. And every day I found physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausting. It was tough going through it, but it was an experience like I've never had. So I'll just I'll let the pictures speak for themselves as I go through. I'll speak to a little bit of them as I come there. I love the fascination here of the work and play going on with the kids and the man walking through with the bricks. The kids and the people, they see you, they're playing up and all that to you. I never ask them to jump, but the same thing, don't want to show off. They know you got the camera and they're showing off to you. So I just like this story of work and play going on here. This is inside, so one of the kilns, they're outdoor kilns. These bricks, they're stacking up the bricks there to be fired. These are some ones that have already been fired in the foreground. You can just feel the dust. You can just feel the environment that they're working through. They're breathing that dust in. From a photographic point of view, so hard on the camera gear. I learned quickly I had to pick my lens for the day, and that was it. There was no changing lenses. And just inside the kilns, another shot within the kiln. I can't even imagine the weight that they're carrying in their head. What I could work out how many bricks they stack is however long your arm is and however high you can reach, that's how many bricks they carry. Women and men carry the same jobs through. But one of the themes I was focusing on, or I decided on when I was in there, was one was this idea of invisible workers in the brick factory. So that's a couple of the previous photos of the dust and all that, trying to sort of work around that theme. And the other one was the women in the brick factories. I was really focusing on the women, the brightness and the vibrancy of the textiles, the clothing they were wearing against that dark, brutal background and all that there. The idea of, our Western culture of, women and men and how we sort of separate the work, yet in Bangladesh and these factories, the work wasn't gendered in that same way. And so I felt that the way of showing how brutal and hard that work was the focus on the women working in those factories. So that's what I did with a lot of my photos, and so I was photographing through it. And this is probably the one that speaks to me most about it there, with the idea of the woman there, the one hand coming down, helping her to grab that brick, the color of her clothing against that brick. So when I saw that scene, I sort of went up and yeah, just shot it to sort of get that idea. I didn't want to shoot the guy at the top. I just wanted that helping hand coming down. Again, the idea of trying to show the scale of the brick factory here with the one poor woman there in the middle with all those bricks around and every one of them having to be cleared out. So again, just trying to play around with that story of it there. The same, that connection, that one eye connection I was able to attain with that woman here. I think it just speaks volumes. Again, same theme going through, focusing on the women, focusing on just the sheer brutality of the work that they're asked to do. Again, this one is more focusing around that theme of invisible worker and all that there, which I was sort of, again, the other one I had in mind when I was in the brick factories. Again, in that same theme, shooting from up high. Again, the access is crazy, you know, and some of the things, I'm standing on those pile of bricks at the top, you know, it's not the most stable base that I'm standing on while I'm shooting these as well. So, you know, yeah, all's well that ends well, I suppose, for me, I mean, hard for these guys. And that connection there, this young man working in the factory, we formed this connection, unspoken one. I remember when he came through, we had a number of eye contact and eventually I gave him my water bottle. But I just see, you can just see right into his soul and his eyes and it still grabs me. So yeah. And a couple of the other faces around the brick factories that I grabbed. This woman on the right, she was working, her job was around the coal. So she was shoveling the coal, carrying it to the kiln and keeping that kiln topped up with fuel so it would keep the bricks firing. And I remember with her, I saw her face and her high cheekbones and she just grabbed me. I'd been to Ethiopia a couple of years before and she just reminded me of the faces and the women in Ethiopia. And I wanted to sort of grab a portrait of her and I asked her if I could, and initially she said no. You always respect people and I don't like to sort of force yourself upon them. But she grabbed me and fascinated me and I told her how beautiful she was and asked her if I could. And she was okay with me taking a photo, but she was worried at that time that she wasn't beautiful because she was covered in charcoal and dust from carrying the coal and all that there on it. And once I assured her she was beautiful and I actually said I was ugly, she was happy to consent for the photo, but you can still see that bit of vulnerability in her face. And I just love it so much. I'm just upset at myself that I had the aperture wrong and it's just not sharp where it needs to be. But the feeling of that photo still comes across to me. And I just love the eyes and the resolution of the guy on the left. And brick breaking, you know, for all the bricks they make, I spend a lot of time breaking them down as well. The bricks from old buildings that are being pulled down, the bricks that aren't up to standard. And they use these for building materials, for building roads and building other infrastructure around Bangladesh. And it's the women, it's always the women I saw working in the brick factories. If the men do work in them as well, I never saw it. And they hold the bricks between their feet and they just smash down with these hammers. And it just sent a shiver up my spine. And with this woman here, you can just see some bandages around her feet and how swollen her feet is there. And they just spent hours after hours each day doing this, just breaking bricks with that hammer. And so I've got a few more shots, but they're the only two I've got here today. Some of the other ways they're transporting bricks around in the back of bikes or dirt and that as well, around the brick factories. Yeah, just breaking up the dirt, building new kilns and all that in them as well, and loading them up into the vans and trucks. Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's time to play. And as soon as work's over, the kids are playing cricket, soccer, again, hanging around for me up in the hills doing somersaults and all that there. One of the things I learned very early in Bangladesh was when to put a camera down and when to join in, you know, have a milk tea with the men, go have a game of cricket with the boys and the young men and, you know, spend the time doing that and just connect with people. It wasn't just about seeing life through a lens. It was about immersing myself in life as much as I could as well. So that's something I did try to do. One of the things, I've moved on from the brick factories now. I was surprised. I was very fortunate when I went into Bangladesh that this event called the Bishwa Ijtema was on when I was there. I'd never heard of this before. And when I was there, I was told very enthusiastically by a couple of the friends I formed in the BPS that the the Bishwa Ijtema is on while you're here. We have to go. And I didn't know much about it. Like I'd never heard of it. I knew nothing about it. And as it says here, it's a World Muslim Congress that's been held in Bangladesh since 1942 every year. More than 4 million Muslims attend and they gather at this event. It's a 3-day long Congress. It's mainly devoted to praying and discussions around Islam. And it's the second largest annual Muslim gathering behind the Hajj pilgrimage. And never heard of it. And buses, trains, boats overloaded with thousands and thousands of people are traveling to and from this event. And the timing of when I was there was just totally fortunate and lucky. Like my trip wasn't planned around this. Like I said, until I got there, I didn't even know it was on. So, but it became one of the most incredible events I'd ever seen in my life. So we got up at 2 in the morning, I was told that day. We needed to get up at 2 in the morning to travel to the outskirts of Dhaka again, to be able to walk into it and get our positions because it was so crowded and it would get locked down. On the way traveling there, on the freeway, and I put that in loose terms, there was a almighty traffic jam. There's always traffic jams in Dhaka. It never moves, but this one was crazy at like 4 in the morning. And there was an overturned truck and there was people and bodies on the ground. And there was an ambulance siren in the background. And half an hour later, we hadn't moved. And half an hour later, the ambulance siren was still, in the background, hadn't moved. No one could get through that traffic, not even the ambulances. So, everything is tough. Everything is brutal, 24 hours a day. And we eventually got to the area. We walked about an hour in. This is going over the bridge, the river. Some of the people starting to arrive or by boat. I think they were actually getting onto the boat to go to it. Sorry then, on this one. And again, just people arriving and coming off the boats towards the area. So we're walking in. And this is where they live for the 3-4 days. There's huge compounds set up. And people have travelled in from all over countryside, Bangladesh, from other countries to this Congress. And there's just these huge tent cities as far as the eye can see. I wasn't allowed inside these compounds. You had to be of Islamic background or Islamic faith, sorry, to be inside the compound. So I was in the general public area just outside up on a footbridge where I stood for about 6 hours at the vantage point, just waiting for the call to prayer at 1 o'clock. And so, just as we're walking in, capturing people around the streets, a man giving alms to some women who are begging. But this is what was all about. And this is a freeway. And 1 o'clock, the call to prayer music starts playing over. As I'm sure if you've been in Muslim countries, you would have heard it before. But people just come out everywhere onto the roads. All the cars, all the buses, everything just stopped and everybody just got out. And all put their mats down and all ready. And at 1 o'clock, they start praying. And I've never, ever seen anything like it. It's an incredible moment of humanity is how I put it. And I got some interesting photos of it. I also probably didn't get what I should have because I was so almost overwhelmed by the whole event happening in front of me. My BPS friends were trying to grab me and say, move around the bridge and all that there, but I was just mesmerized of what I was seeing at this. So they're getting ready and then people are down and praying. And this is a freeway. And as far as I could see going forward and behind me as far as I could see and to the left of me as far as I could see were people just like this, masses of people praying in all colour. It was just unbelievable. Again, the last one I did move around and was able to get a bit more of a different perspective on the people praying, a couple of different angles. The one on the right is actually, again, at the end, there was once it had finished, it was almost sort of like our memorial Anzac Day. When the prayer had finished I think it went for 5 minutes, there was then 2 minutes silence where everybody, 4 million people just stood there and you couldn't hear a pin drop. And it was to remember all Muslims who had died in the previous 12 months. So just amazing. And so when that all finished, then it's back to chaos. Everybody making their way onto the roads, the buses' horns were already honking, and life goes on. So that was it. And then it was, us trying to get out of there. I think it took us about 2 hours to walk back. My arms were grabbed probably 1 million times by people wanting photos, but an incredible moment. A few more people praying later on that day, just on the streets. And then when it's over, they go to the train stations and it's time to make your way back. So this is at the end of the event. So that first photo when they're praying was on day one of the event. And on the last day of the event, we went back to capture everybody leaving. And so this is where you get those incredible shots of the trains just totally packed. So again, people trying to get onto the trains. Once the trains are full, then people just start climbing onto the roofs in between the carriages. It's so dangerous. I was told that 2,000 people a year die in Bangladesh just from traveling on the roofs of trains. So yeah, another amazing statistic. Just yeah, more photos from people on the roofs of trains at the station. So stationary here. Yeah, on the roofs of trains, just the masses. The whole train roof is just full of people. I can't even imagine it. I know that people are encouraging me to go up there, and I said, no way, sorry, I don't do that. And the photo, I'm sure everybody's seen this photo, it's so overexposed. But yes, people jumping between the trains. And this isn't just done for me as a tourist and all that there, even though I have no doubt that they're hamming it up and they're seeing it there and, you know, they're showing off on that to us. It's so creative on the thing that it's a way to get across trains. It's an incredibly dangerous way. No doubt many people get hurt. But I've seen this quite a bit. I've got 1 or 2 photos I put up. It was actually back and forth, people jumping around and all that there with it. And as the next frame shows, it's not uncommon. People are just jumping between carriages, between trains, off the trains down. It's just a way how they get around. And yeah, it still blows me away, really. Photo of a man in the train window. I tried to frame it with I like the idea of having the language there on it to sort of give it a bit of context of place and that as well, which goes with the attire he's wearing. So it sort of adds to the story rather than just a random person looking out the window in a train. So next thing we'll move on to the shipyards. So along the banks of Dhaka, shipyards, another dangerous place for people to work. This is where huge ships basically are taken when they're finished to die, to be broken down, and then the parts to be used to build new ships. Sorry. So I spent a whole day just walking around these shipyards as well. Yeah, again, you got to watch every foot where it goes. It's something on this day when I was in the shipyards walking through, I hurt my ankle quite badly because again, it's one of those moments where there's so much happening around me and I'm looking at this and I'm looking at that and I'm not looking at where I'm putting my feet and it's not exactly stable ground you're walking from. And I hit the corner of some sort of like a rail and overwent my ankle and you went through it. And this was on, I think, the 3rd day of my trip. So I still had 12 days to go with an ankle swollen 2.5 times its size. But, you know, push through and I wasn't getting ice anywhere in Bangladesh to ice my ankle down in the evenings. So just had to deal with it to get through. That was all part of that physical challenge that I sort of talked about going there. But yeah, it was hard. One of the challenges I found when I first got to Bangladesh, and I'm sort of jumping around, I appreciate that, was the first 2 days I thought I shot really poorly. Because it was different to how I shoot back home, so different. It's chaotic. I hear people talk about it when they travel to India, that it's so chaotic, it's hard to simplify it and work out the scenes. And that's something the workplace has made easier for me. But what I had to sort of learn to do was tell myself the stories are everywhere in front of me. This was the problem. And I was overwhelmed by it because there was just there. And I had to learn how to, not learn, but I had to tell myself, I've got to narrate these stories. I don't have to find them, and that's what I'm used to doing. I got to narrate them. I had to learn how to try and simplify and look through everything that was happening and find the story within that scene. And sometimes I did it better than others, but that was sort of my mind shift that I had to make through. And I think once I was able to make that mind shift, it made it a bit easier for me to go through. I started trying to not look at everything that was happening, but started to look for that detail, for that small story within the big scene that was around me all the time. So yeah, just through the ships, looking at the colour, unfortunately, in the middle of the day, the lights pretty harsh here, but the men working, and I was able to get a bit of eye contact with this man here. Coming through again, the dangers of them, where they're working perched up on these, climbing the ships, welding away, the colours and that of it I thought was great. And there's this guy with his chickens and ducks walking around in the shipyard. So I asked him if I could take his photo, and he was more than happy to. I don't know how much that would weigh. I doubt if I could even pick it up off the ground, to be honest, but there we go, the chickens and ducks. I suspect the end of their day wasn't too good. Kids playing cricket. It's something, again, you saw in all these workplaces and all that going through, especially, it's probably towards the end of the day. The kids bring out the cricket bats, the soccer, and that, as I talked about. But one of my favourite stories of the whole trip was at the shipyards. Is around lunchtime-ish there, around 1 o'clock in the shipyards that day. I brought my lunch with me, and I settled down somewhere to have some lunch. Of course, as soon as I sat down, I had 15, 20 companions with me straight away. I always had people of the Bangladesh Photographic Society with me, taking me around. But usually when we got to the workplaces, they went their way, I went my way, and we all just shot where we were going to shot. And we sort of occasionally crossed paths and met up, and we all had each other's mobile phone numbers. So that's how we work. So I spent a lot of it just walking around myself and all that through the areas. And we sort of met up and had lunch, and then people come and talk to us, and they always ask questions like where you're from, what you think of Bangladesh. And as soon as you say you're from Australia, they start talking cricket, especially if it's young men. And what sort of emerged that day when I was at these shipyards is we'd say cricket, you say from Melbourne, and they started talking Melbourne Renegades in the 2020. And that's when the semi-final of the Big Bash was on. So soon, with the time difference, I was in a small cafe. Cafe is the wrong word. I don't got a small shop with a small television with rabbit ears, and me and all my Bangladesh mates. All of a sudden, I had a lot of them. We're all watching the Melbourne Renegades in that semi-final, and we spent about the next hour and a half watching the Renegades. And they knew every statistic. They knew every player, every batting average, every bowling average. It was incredible. So again, that cost me time in the shipyards. I could have missed out some great shots, but that experience I'll never forget. And everyone was barracking for the Renegades because I barracked for the Renegades. It was incredible. So I loved it. That was one of my favourite moments of the trip. And sort of then we come out after watching some of that Big Bash, and the sun had got lower in the sky and start to get that really beautiful light coming through. So I spent a bit more time around the shipyards just trying to capture that light onto the ships, and the men working with it. Again, the sun going down is not the end of work. They're still painting away, still derusting, still welding away in it. And so, yeah, just using that beautiful light and silhouetting and just trying to capture some scene and try to work in some layering. It's something that I found easier and probably did a little bit better in Bangladesh than what I ever do over here anyway. Going back here earlier in the day, one of the areas in the shipyard I went to was the foundry. And this was probably as harsh as an environment that I saw. The air was thick, so thick with toxic smoke. And yeah, I was given a mask when I went there, a face mask before face mask now as we see them. Not that I think it did much. I probably only spent about 15 minutes in this area before my head just went, what is this air doing to my lungs? This can't be good. God knows for these poor men and working there, and not just men, but young boys working there in the foundry, which I found so tough, you know. The girls, they're going to go back to the brick factories, and I sort of should have mentioned it there when I saw those young girls working there. My daughter at the time when I travelled there was about 15, 16. I can't remember exactly. So that connection I was making of seeing these girls working who were similar age to my daughter back home at that time was something I found very emotional and very challenging all that there with it. And same here when you see these boys working, they should be at school and look at that environment, and again, no shoes on their feet. It's a harsh environment. They're very older kids are hitting the smaller kids. The men are hitting the older kids, but it's all to keep them safe in inverted commas. It's the way I teach them. It's a harsh environment. It's a brutal environment in every way, in behaviour, in work environments. Yeah, challenging. And again, I didn't even know this shot just now. I had no idea. All I got told quickly was turn here and look, and I just put my camera up and shot. Had no chance to think of settings. I didn't even know what was happening yet. It's one of my favourite trips, pics of the whole trip. Just the energy in it. Molten steel, no shoes. I'm a safety officer at my job, so it continued to astound me. That's juxtaposition between my job back home and what I was seeing in front of me every day. Pouring it by hand, pouring the molten steel. They're making propellers for the boats in this area, which is what they're doing. Again, just inside the area, so dark, what they're working in the environment. The air was just oppressive. It's the only way to put it. Yeah, hammering away. And this is a chef I saw going through. He's just cooking the food up for him. Got his cigarette hanging out his mouth. I like the idea of all the smoke coming from the food, and then he's got his cigarette out of the mouth, sort of matching into that scene. A bit soft and all that, high ISOs, be able to capture it. And one of the boys I saw again working in just this pitch black workshop and just working in through there, and went in there and asked him if I could take a photo, and he was, yeah, more than happy to. So we move on now and move on to the riverside. So every day, 3,000 daily labourers come along the river to unload the boats that have come up from the countryside or from the other factories with coal, with bricks, with sand for the factories and all that for that next day. So just life along the riverside is just, you know, platform after platform after platform of, you know, boats and people just carrying all sorts of resources from the boats into the nearby factories, back and forth, you know, all day, not all day, but for the morning especially. That's the pollution and that in the background going on, smoke being poured out from those brick factories in there as well. But this scene, I love it here on it. The colour of the woman. What I like about this is almost in camera. I have not edited this much at all, and this is how the scene presented. I didn't even really notice it when I took it at the time. It's only when I saw the photo afterwards that I realised how cool it was of her position and the colour and that of it. A lot of these shots I just burst shoot through, capture that one, capture the next, just capture them as people coming through, trying to just get that separation into it. So a lot of my photos, I didn't even know what I got, so I literally went back and reviewed them at the hotel that night or a few days later, whenever I got to them. Yeah, so, but yeah, I just love that colour of her. It sort of works with that, the series I was working at with the brick factories with the women and that in that environment. Yeah, just the same one again with the men, the separation on both levels, that bit of layering, even that one person at the back, which was just again luck and all that with it. I decided to try and do some shooting between legs and all that of people going through. Not bad. It's soft at the front. I needed to move back a little bit to get it exactly right, but a lot of this I've never done before. I was learning as I go. I was coming up with ideas and trying things I've never done before. I was so out of my comfort zone of how I was shooting that I was just giving anything a go, just coming up with ideas and giving it a go, then try the next one. The ones that sort of work you're seeing, a lot of them that didn't work, well, they're still on the hard drive. This was a particularly hard shot for us. Not hard in getting it, even though a bit precarious. Again, there was a plank along that water. I sort of had walked out to the plank and held the camera down to the water to try and get those reflections and shot that scene through. The plank was a little bit wobbly and I really didn't want to fall into that water. So I sort of, I'm pretty confident in my balance and center of gravity, but nonetheless it was there. But when I was shooting this, not long after I took this shot, a woman fell from this platform and she fell down straight onto here. And I just watched it. And yeah, it's quickly done. I'm probably a few hundred meters away here. So I was trying to carefully get off that platform back there and run to help, and people there. People are still working through. Every load is money. They don't get paid for the day, they get paid for the load. So again, it's sort of talking about you don't get in people's way because you're costing them money and they're not interested in anything but just keep working through. They know you're there, they smile, but if you interrupt them, they get angry because time is money. Some of them are running through. So when this woman fell, very few people went to help her. They want to keep working. They need their money because it's so, their existence is so hard. And I ran up there and a couple of people had got there at that stage, and she was badly hurt. You know, minimum, you know, she probably broke a collarbone and a couple of collarbones and ribs. Worse, she could have broken neck. I don't know. A few people just picked her up and just carried her up. You know, no first aid, all that there. And the guy I was with at the BPS come up with me at the same time. He'd run up across it too, and I was a bit shaken by it. And I said, are they taking her to hospital? There's an ambulance coming. He said, oh, she's got no money to go to hospital and nothing there. And I said, just how much? Just tell me how much and I'm paying for her to go to hospital. And I just gave over money for them to get a taxi to get her to hospital. And what happened there, I'll never know. But yeah, it still upsets me in that with it. So, and after that, I probably put the camera away for about half an hour, 45 minutes. I just went and grabbed myself a milk tea and sat down and drank a milk tea and talked to a couple of the workers and all that there on their break before going back. So it was a tough moment in that for us. I still see her falling. So tough shot. But it's important to talk about this because of life. Again, we see these and we sort of see the brutality, but I think it's another thing seeing it when you see someone actually hurt themselves and the true consequences of how dangerous the work is they do. These planks here, I walked across them a couple of times to get into the ship. So I got some photos of me in the ships and that later on. And they just wobble. The amount of give them that in those boards and planks. I was so slow in comparison to the speed they walk across them is astounding, and the coordination. So it's the other end. They get there, they've got their stones, they just chuck it into a pile, whether it's bricks, whether it's stones, whether it's sand, whether it's coal. And then there's this guy here, and he gives them a token, and that's for that part. And they just collect their tokens, and at the end of the day, they get all their tokens and they cash them in, and that's the amount of money they earn that day. So that's where time is money for them. A quick shot here, a bit out of focus, but I'm quite pleased with this. Like, it literally is just pulling the camera to the side and shooting, pulling and shooting. There was no framing, no nothing there with it. Just trying to get something like this. I wanted to get a one person framed by the other, which you've seen other people, I'm sure, have got shots like that. But I was really lucky to get the two extra faces. And while the focus is a bit soft and all that there, I achieved beyond what I wanted with it. So it's one of my favourite photos with it. Getting below the planks as well and finding different angles and shooting up, looking at that colour. But those coal was falling off, it was going through, and a couple of times coal hit us in the arm, and I didn't realise how heavy and how that coal actually is, showing my naivety there. Different ones there going to the coal piles and, again, throwing the coal onto the piles, just able to play around with layers here and play around with some colours as they were walking through. And this is into the boats, as I was saying, as I'm capturing the bricks. So again, literally able to just be there and photograph them as close as. Access is incredible, just staying out their way. So a couple of shots, I only, put one in the presentation for the boat. And then just, again, more people working off. What I sort of like the idea of this shot and the next shot, the concept I had here was about justice. We sort of see scales as justice, and I see the work, what they're doing, that there's no justice around it. So that was what I was working on with these couple of photos, trying to get this idea of the injustice of the work I was doing. And then vegetables and that as well. Not only that, food's coming in from countryside, Bangladesh every day to the markets. So we're there early and just a couple of shots of people. How many cabbages is that? I've got no idea, and the weight of that is just incredible. So what they're generally doing is, we saw this guy, one person's carrying him from the boat, he gets, halfway up the stairs, then he transfers the basket to this person, who then carries it the rest of the way up to the waiting vehicle, and then that workflow continues. And bananas, again, just another one to put there with the fruit and veggie theme. That's a lot of bananas. I don't know what weighs more, all those cabbages or all those bananas, but I can tell you that there's no way I'll be able to carry them. So, and just the sort of last one around the rivers at the end of the day. This is one of the few bits of machinery that I saw that, to help work easier. And I sort of asked about this to some of the people there and asked about why wasn't there more automation or more machinery helping through. And the answer is sort of twofold and simple as labour's so cheap. And the value of life is cheap as well. And so with cheap labour, the cost of machinery, it's just easy to use that human labour with it. So that's really hard in one way. But the other way it was put to me as well, if this was all automated, what are the jobs going to be for these 160 million people? Not all of them, but the people who work along these. And I don't have the answer to that. It's just not as simple. What come out of it is just not as simple as automating and trying to make that life easier, because you'll be taking those jobs away. Mind you, nobody should be working those jobs. They're brutal. So don't know the answer to some of those. But after all this, after a week and a bit darker, we made our way down to Cox's Bazaar, where the fisher workers are. And I was so fortunate there. One of the people I got to catch up with in the BPS, his name was Ronnie, and he lived down there, and he was also, he just placed in the World Press Photography of the Year in 2018. So I got to spend 3-4 days with him. He took me down to his villages and that around there. So I was so incredibly lucky for that. And they were so, as I've said before, so generous with their time with me. And as we were driving along the beach, and Cox's Bazaar is the longest beach in the world. Again, I never knew that to go in there. And Bangladesh is so low. It's so affected by typhoons each year because a lot of it is below sea level, similar to the Netherlands, but it doesn't have that infrastructure to deal with the surging waters, especially when the typhoons hit. So it is severely affected by flood each year. So yeah, just some photos of the fishermen working along Cox's Bazaar here through it. And we come across a scene where they'll pulling the net in the evening or in the late afternoon, trying to pull their catch in. So we got around there and got to spend probably about, I know, it probably went for about an hour at the end until these men pulled this net in, hand pulled it in. It was, again, hard work. And one of the things I sort of, he encouraged me to do was to get under the net and shoot under the net. And it was adrenaline. There was nothing lined up. I'd literally just holding the camera and pressing the button, moving. I was thigh deep in water, not here, but further down. Sometimes thigh deep in water as we're moving in and out of the net. The men loved it. They didn't care. They were just laughing at me under there. I was getting soaking wet. I tried to have some sort of cover over the camera and just burst shooting. Stay under there for about 20, 30 seconds, run out of the net, reassess, and then run under and do it again. And these were some of the shots I got. This is probably my favorite with these leading lines with the men there through it. Another one of them from under the nets when I was under there. Nothing's framed. Literally, it's just hold the camera out and shoot. Another one from under the nets. And then I've gone across, we'll move across now to the fishing villages there where the catchers come in, they're salting the fish and they're hanging it up to dry. And they'll hang up there for a couple of weeks drying in the sun. Just people working within there at the fish, hanging them up to dry, salting the fish. One of the boys hanging it up for me. Yeah, just around there, the fishing boats coming in the morning. Bit of luck with the framing of the sun there. At the end of the day, packing away the nets. And this is the moon boats, which are quite unique to Bangladesh, are just so photogenic. Again, with the moon boats there and the men the boys putting away the nets and that after the day out fishing, getting ready for the next day. And as we're driving back from Cox's Bazaar, it's about a 12-hour drive from Cox's Bazaar to back into Dhaka, and that's a long 12 hours, trust me. Horns for 12 hours, the roads aren't exactly smooth. So we stopped a few times, and one of the areas I really wanted to stop at was the chili processing fields. It's one of the reasons I went at the time I did, is I wanted to go to the area and see the chilies. It's about a 3-week window where they've got all these chilies out in the compounds just drying. And again, this colours and that with it are amazing, but the brutality of the work. So what these women are doing, as was explained to me, is they're picking out the bad chilies, the ones that are no good. So they literally just spend all day crouched like that, just sifting through the chilies in their hand, making their assessments, picking out the chilies that are no good. Again, big long lines of women doing that there. And we had some fun there with the women with us as well, because again, they love coming up, and a few of them coming up, offering me chilies, asking me to eat some chilies and all that there with it. And I don't mind the chili, so had a good laugh as I took on the challenge and ate a chili or so. And it was good. I ended up walked away with a bag of chilies to add to my dinner in the next few nights as well. Again, just in the fields that was sort of not far away from where the chilies were. Rice, putting out rice to dry after it's done. They get these great photogenic lines. And what I sort of noticed is that women sweep it up into these lines. And as soon as they're finished sweeping it up, I haven't got it, the men come through and they kick it all back out again. And then the women go through and they sweep it up. And this is how they're turning over the rice. And when they're finished, the men come and kick it out again. So, and again, at the end of the day, they put them in these piles and put it on the cone. And then the next day, they spread it all out again. And again, this was just a bit of fun where I was laying down with the rice and the women were just throwing it all over me as I was trying to get this action shot of the rice coming through straight at us. And coming towards the end, one of the last places we went to was up in Silat, which is right up near the border of India. And it's where the stone quarries are. And this is I spent a whole day in the stone quarries here, and there's about 15,000 labourers, men, women and children, that work with stone searching, collecting, crushing. And again, it's just such a dangerous environment. And so many people, as I was told, are killed here through mudslide and all that with it. And this is, through all these workplaces I went through, this was the one place that the Apu, who's who I was with here, he would not let me go off alone. He was with me the whole time. He was always worried and looking out for my safety as we walked through. Again, it's a foreign environment to me. And I walked right down into these pits. I was right down into all these areas here, the boats up along here. So yeah, it's just giving you an idea of the scene. And again, just the same thing, carrying rocks, the weight of those rocks. Again, I just love the eyes and this connection, just this humanity and all that coming through. And I like the fact that it was in I think it was a Barcelona top, not big into my soccer. But all the different, soccer team jerseys going through was something that I sort of noticed through here with all the young men. They start stacking the stones into the trucks. Again, just a bit of silhouetting into the sky. Sifting, getting down really low, trying to find those different points of view, sifting through the dirt, trying to find whatever stones that they find they're after. Again, playing with layering as I was sifting through. Big rocks, just the weight of these rocks and the power of the sheer weight of them carrying the strength needed to carry these boulders through. And I was literally just running after them, holding the camera down at about my knee level and just shooting. And all the way trying to stay out of their way. Like this is on sand and this is up a steep hill on sand. It's giving, trying to carry this rock. And you can see with the arms over here and the legs, just the power and the sweat coming through on them and the power and the exhaustion trying to get this up. And all day doing this. So I go back to it's just brutal hard work. Women, again, men doing it. 2 women to be able to get the weight up onto her. And then she carries it off by herself onto the truck to be able to be loaded and carried away. And the kids working in it too. And it's always the kids where that emotional response comes through to it. And, it sort of gives me that different concept around play. We say sort of play of toys where, they're playing, they're not working, but they're playing, they're learning, they're mimicking what their parents do. And it's so heartbreaking. And they should be at school and kinder and having fun. But this is their life and this is the only life they know. And again, another kid, with this one, I asked him to pose and frame him between the shovel. I can still see the beads of sweat. I love that there on his head and that connection through. Panning, just panning and shifting, looking for stones and panning for stones. Working there through, panning away. Children again. Shots again, I was just trying to time the shots as I was taking it back. Again, just burst shooting through. Trying to use it as a frame, do a bit of sub-framing of the scene. And this is the very final shot of my presentation. And it's so bad, it was also the very final shot I took in Bangladesh. And this was at the stone quarry. After this shot, we basically drove about 10 hours back to Dhaka, right through the night, and I got on the plane the next morning and flew out. And what I saw of this scene, when I saw it at the moment, the moment I saw it, this is what I saw, and I still see it now. And here's the holy figure right here, even with his hands up. And if you count, there's actually 12 disciples or apostles around him, and even the way they're sort of like praying and looking at him and reverential around him. So that's my final shot of Bangladesh, and I hope we enjoyed the presentation.
Right, thanks Adrian, well done. That's awesome, amazing. So we've got a few questions.
Sure.
First, how many frames did you shoot in the 15 days you were there?
About 20,000.
Wow. Okay, and
that's why some of those photos, just to expand on that. So when you asked me a couple of weeks ago to do this presentation, I said, okay, I've got to put something together. And because we're in lockdown, I actually went through some of my files again. And some of the photos we've got there now, I only just found in the last week. That one of the coloured woman in the middle with the 2 either side, I only found the photo last week.
Wow.
I missed it the first couple of times I went through it. So yeah, I'm still sure there's some hidden stuff in there. There's just so many photos for me to work through.
Yeah. Are you shooting RAW and JPEG or just JPEG?
Just RAW. Just
RAW. Yeah. And how did you get the introduction to the Bangladesh Photo Society?
I introduced myself, sort of. The story through that there is I entered a photo competition in New York in 2018. And this is one of the ways I'd already started thinking about Bangladesh, and I come second in this competition, so I was very lucky. And the person who beat me was a Bangladesh photographer, and his photo was astounding. And so I looked him up on Instagram and I found him and I sent him a message and said, I'm thinking of coming across to Bangladesh and I'd love to be able to, catch up for a day. I'm willing to pay you and all that. And ended up worked out that this guy was the president of the Bangladesh Photographic Society, and it all worked from there. And he said, it'll be our honour to have you across, and we have many members, and they will all take you around, and they will be they'll be their honour to do so. And so that's what. And the arguments I had with them was more around money. None of them wanted me to pay for anything. They wanted to pay for everything. And this is something that that was the only ever arguments I had with them. I said, no, I pay. And this is, it was an offence to them if I didn't let them pay. And it was something I found challenging. And all they asked for me was on the very near the end, not in the very last day, but just before we went to those stone quarries, they asked me to give a presentation to the BPS on my Melbourne photography. They wanted to see that because it was such a foreign world to them.
Yeah.
Because they hadn't travelled and all that as well. So and he asked me that before I come there. So I put something together for them. English isn't a problem in Bangladesh because of its background and history of India. English is a official language, so most people can speak some English. And in the BPS, most of the people in the BPS were actually university educated in Bangladesh. So they all had very good English and all that with it. So communication wasn't a problem.
Yeah, which leads nicely into the next question about, is it safe to travel there alone or as a couple? And I guess the difference between men and women, I mean.
Look, you get a lot of countries, I think it'll be harder to travel around as a woman on your own than as a male. There is no infrastructure. There is no, you're not going to go find a day tour. It literally doesn't exist there. And while we'd worked out something with the BPS beforehand, it was pretty loose. I landed there without much plans other than I wanted to go to some of these places and I thought I'd work it out when I get there, thinking that there'll be something there, and there wasn't. But I was very lucky I had that connection of the BPS, and I was so lucky with their generosity. If it wasn't for that, it would have been so much harder for me to get around. You know, Cox's Bazaar wasn't something that was overly in my plan, but they said, we must go down there, you must go down there. And so I did, and it was great. You know, it was good. It was because it's very different to everything else I'd done in Dhaka, you know, down Cox's Bazaar with the fishermen. And the guy I went down there with, he actually, as I said, he placed third in the World Press Photographer of the Year. We went down with a couple. And it's for his work in Rohingya and around there on it. And he actually offered to take me down to Rohingya into the refugee camps for a day because he's got a pass into it. And I thought about this for a bit, and eventually I said no, because while I've been to the workplaces, I was photographing daily life, as hard, as brutal, whatever that is. It was their daily lives. Rohingya people have lost everything, and I didn't think they needed me coming through with my camera when they'd lost everything. So I said no to that. I said, let's just go to the fishing villages and do that.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess that's you've sort of answered this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Did you have to be escorted through these places, or were you free to wander where you wanted to go?
Pretty much free to wander wherever I wanted to go, you know. Like I said, the only restriction was don't get in anyone's way, because it was, you know, you were costing them money. They were working, and, you know, I was told to me at the very start, the BPS guy said the same with them, just don't get in their way. And what I would do when I got to a workplace is I'd spend the first 15 minutes or so just standing back, not actually even having the camera out, and just watching and understanding and trying to understand. There's a rhythm. What I found is that most of these places, there was a rhythm to them. If I could sort of work out what that rhythm was and work into that rhythm, that guided me how to shoot it. It also guided me then, once I worked out rhythm, it helped me then know where to go and where not to go and help stay out of the way. So I did a lot of observing before I just went in. I just didn't get off, you know, the rickshaw that took us there and just start shooting. I observed first and tried to understand how the scenes work.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Oh, I feel that street photography is so much about the art of observation. Yeah. Amazing imagery, Adrian. One last question. What camera equipment do you take traveling with you? And do you have a favorite lens to shoot with?
So over there, I took, I've got a Canon 16 Mark II. So that's what I had across with me. I've got a Canon 6D, my first camera. So usually I take the two bodies away. So I kept the second body just in case, you know, if something goes wrong with your first one, you've got a backup and that with you. And I took 3 lenses with me to this. So I had a 24-70 f2.8, I had a 70-200 f4, and I had a 15-35 f2.8. So those were the 3 lenses I had with me. After a couple of days, how I decided, I actually took both. First time, I actually carried both cameras with me both days. I had to decide at the start of the day. I picked the 2 lenses that I'd want for that day, usually wide, you know, 15-35 and 24-70. I would set the one camera up with each lens, and I'd carry one over each shoulder through those work scenes, so I could actually then decide what I wanted, because I'm used to changing lenses, but it wasn't an option there. You could not take your lens off in those environments. Your sensor would be done with the dust and everything in the air. So I started just carrying the 2 cameras with me each day, and then I would just sort of look at a scene and decide. And, you know, when I was traveling from one to the other, if I got indoors, if I decided I wanted to zoom, but most of the work, the zoom wasn't going to be work for anyway. I wanted wide. I wanted to shoot wide, low and wide. And I think you've seen a lot of the images, that's how I went.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We've got some more questions coming through. So what's your shooting process, Adrian? Do you prefer shutter priority, aperture, or whatever gives you the best exposure at the time?
I tend to shoot full manual. So I like to sort of control my shutter speed and my aperture, and I tend to shoot ISO auto and let that sort of control it. I shoot Canon. I think Canon tend to overexpose, so I usually set it on a stop under for the most part, except when I was going into those really dark workshops, and then I'd put that back into, I wouldn't have it a stop under there. But most of the time I shoot manual. That's how I shoot in Melbourne when I walk around Melbourne. So that's how I'm used to shooting and comfortable with shooting. So I sort of just took that across. I sort of didn't want to change how I shot or what works for me here over there. I just took that same process across and shot there with it.
Yeah, sure. We've got some lovely comments here in the chat. Amazing storytelling photos and fantastic presentation. Adrian's showing great presence of mind, skill and experience in producing shots where the scenes are first encounters in relation to the chilies. Actually, there's an interesting question here from Jason. He talks about the colour of the clothing and textiles is amazing and is in such stark contrast to what they do in their daily lives. Is there a reason they choose to wear and use such vibrant colours that you're aware of?
Not that I know of, no. It's when I've been to India, it's the same in India, and you've been to India, Sue, and you would have seen the same as well, those vibrant textiles, especially that the women wear and all that there. So I don't know if it's sort of culture and it's just, it's the clothes and the fashion that the women wear, or well, I don't know the answer to that, but it's something I talked about at the brick factories. That's something I was focusing on my photos of, bringing out those colours and seeking them out and juxtaposing them against those brutal, bland backgrounds and trying to use that to really sort of help tell that story of the scene. So yeah, I absolutely see it, but I'm not sure. It's just the clothes that the women wear around there and the men. You walk the streets, that's the clothes they're wearing. At the workplaces, that's the clothes they're wearing. It's just the clothes they wear. I don't know the answer, sorry, if there's another reason around it.
No, I'm not sure either. More lovely comments for you, Adrian. So thanks, Adrian. Beautiful work, very inspiring. And congratulations, has this come through on a great presentation and incredible images, beautiful work. So thank you so much, Adrian, for being our first speaker. Back to you, Russell.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Yeah, that's absolutely stunning presentation, Adrian. And I know you work through your other social outlets and that. If anyone would like to check out more about Adrian's work, check out his Insta feed at Adtamo. I hope I got that right, ADTAMO. That's on Instagram. And speaking of Instagram, if you're not already, you can follow us on AASPI_Inc. If you've got some shooting inspiration, or if you need some shooting inspiration, you can join our monthly street challenge. So this month's theme is small things. So you can just hashtag AASPI_small things, and you can check out our Insta feed. If you require any further information on what's going on at AASPI, you can check out our website. And just finally, next week we have our second presentation. That's Tuesday, August the 25th. We head across the border to South Australia to hear from John Staines, the giant Evertonian, to check out his street scene in Adelaide. So it's shot in the heart of Adelaide, so I'm looking forward to hearing and seeing that. So until then, I guess everyone should stay safe and good night.
Great.
Thank you all.